want to go in with the boat full to save time, and the only way to do that is to pull gear. The only way I can do that is to stay awake and make it happen.
His doctors told him it was over, but Sig Hansen refused to listen. After more than 3 decades on the Bering Sea, the legendary Deadliest Catch captain had survived 2 heart attacks, a shocking arrest, and a bitter legal battle. To many, it looked like the end of the road. Instead, he made a decision that left fans completely divided. So what really happened to Sig Hansen after Deadliest Catch? And why does he refuse to walk away from the Northwestern? Join us as we uncover what really happened to Sig Hansen after Deadliest Catch. The man the camera fell in love with. To the millions of fans who discovered Deadliest Catch when it premiered in 2005, Sig Hansen looked like he walked out of a Viking saga. A big-shouldered Norwegian-American from Seattle, who barely flinched when 50-foot waves crashed over the deck of his boat. He was gruff, funny in a dry way, and completely fearless. He was the type of man who made viewers feel safe just watching him. If Sig was at the helm, everything was going to be okay. But that image was built on a real foundation because Sig Hansen had not become a legend by accident. His father and grandfather had reportedly helped pioneer opilio crab fishing in Alaska, forging the family name through decades of brutal seasons on the Bering Sea. Fishing was never simply a career handed to him. It was the world he had been born into. By the age of 14, he was already working aboard the family boat, and less than a decade later, at just 22, he was trusted to relieve other captains. 2 years after that, the Northwestern was his, making him one of the youngest captains in the fleet. In an industry where serious accidents and fatalities were an accepted risk, the Northwestern reportedly never lost a crew member at sea during Sig Hansen's career. That remarkable record showed the discipline, preparation, and high standards he demanded from everyone on board. He was made for that life. His boat took first place in the final crab derbies for both king and opilio crab, easily beating out the rest of the fleet. Naturally, Hollywood noticed. Next thing you know, he is voicing a cartoon character for Pixar and showing up on Celebrity Apprentice. A random fisherman from Seattle suddenly became a massive television star, and people could not get enough of it. But nobody saw the actual damage of playing that character year after year, because the production crew edited all of it out. For all the dangers the Bering Sea had thrown at him over the years, the first real crack in Sig Hansen's story came from a place no one expected: inside his own chest. The heart attack nobody was ready for. It happened in March 2016. The Northwestern was in the middle of another crab season on the Bering Sea, and for Sig Hansen, it seemed like just another day at work until a sharp, crushing pain spread through his chest and refused to ease. He would later describe it as feeling like a knife driven into his chest and left there. Even before he admitted anything was wrong, the pain was already written across his face. Yet when his crew asked if he was all right, Sig responded the way he always had, insisting he was fine. That refusal to acknowledge what was happening to his own body was pure Sig. The same instinct that made him a great captain, the refusal to show weakness, to keep moving, to push through, was now actively working against him. Medics eventually ran tests and discovered what he had been denying for hours. The attack was not exhaustion or a pulled muscle. Unfortunately, a blood clot had lodged in one of his arteries, and he was in the middle of a full-blown heart attack. He was medevaced off his own boat and rushed to a hospital in Anchorage, Alaska. Cameras captured footage that later aired to a stunned audience. Viewers who had spent years watching this man stand unbothered in the worst weather on Earth now sat at home watching him get lifted off the Northwestern. For a lot of people, it genuinely felt like watching a myth shatter in real time. Sig Hansen was supposed to be the one who survived everything. That was the whole point of him. He recovered and came back the very next season, which should have been the relieving part of the story. But fans who paid attention noticed something the cameras did not say out loud. A man who had just survived a heart attack at sea had returned to the same conditions that nearly ended his life. Nothing had changed. The cigarettes were still there. The brutal schedule was still there. The refusal to slow down was very much still there. And the body that sent him that warning had not forgotten it. Because less than 2 years later, the warning came again, and this time the margin was razor thin. 10 minutes from the end. Just weeks before the 2018 crab season was due to begin, Sig Hansen found himself fighting what appeared to be an ordinary sinus infection. It seemed so minor that his doctor prescribed a routine course of antibiotics, but the medication triggered a violent allergic reaction that led to a second heart attack. Unlike the first, there were no cameras nearby to capture the terrifying moment, leaving Sig to face yet another medical emergency away from the television audience that had followed his life for years. The details he eventually shared were genuinely chilling. A nurse reportedly told him afterward that he probably had less than 10 minutes left. That was how close it came. An EpiPen shot sent his system into shock, and doctors had to spend weeks making sure he was medically cleared before he was allowed anywhere near the Northwestern or the cameras for season 15. 2 heart attacks in less than 3 years, and the second one had reportedly been minutes away from a completely different outcome. This time, however, something finally changed. The man who had spent years with a cigarette either between his fingers or hanging from his lip walked away from smoking for good. Sig never tried to hide why. He admitted that the second heart attack had left him embarrassed and ashamed of the choices he had made, and those feelings became the motivation to quit. For viewers who had watched him light cigarette after cigarette for more than a decade, it was a rare glimpse of vulnerability from a man who had built his reputation on toughness. Around that time, Sig admitted in interviews that he already had 1 foot out the door. Yet almost in the same breath, he revealed why retirement remained out of reach. He confessed that he simply could not stop because, in his own words, the ego portion of him would not allow it. That admission offered more insight into his future than any medical update ever could. His greatest obstacle was no longer the Bering Sea itself, but the part of him that refused to believe life existed beyond the wheelhouse, a struggle those closest to him had reportedly recognized for years. But while his body was fighting him privately, a far more public storm was already building on shore. The night that changed how fans saw everything. In May 2017, Sig Hansen and his family spent the evening in Seattle celebrating 17. Mai, Norway's Constitution Day, a tradition that carried special meaning for a family proud of its Norwegian heritage. As the celebration came to an end, they called an Uber to take them home, expecting the night to finish as quietly as it had begun. Instead, the journey sparked an incident that made national headlines and forced many longtime fans to see the legendary captain in a very different light. The driver, Wahid Lawal, stopped en route to let the family know their ride had been canceled through the app and that they would need to request another. He also declined to accept cash, which was against Uber's policy. Police reports say that when Sig heard this, he became enraged. He and his son-in-law allegedly screamed at the driver, insulted him, and threatened him. It was then that Sig spat on the man, both on his car seat and on the driver himself. Then he got out of the vehicle and reportedly kicked it, leaving around $1,800 in damage. Police arrived at his home a short time later and found him intoxicated. He was arrested and booked into King County Jail. The difference between Sig Hansen's public image and his private life was becoming harder to ignore. On Deadliest Catch, he was the calm captain who kept his crew together, even when everything around them was falling apart. But away from the cameras, a very different side of his life was beginning to come into view. The man viewers admired on television was now making headlines for reasons that had nothing to do with fishing. The story spread fast, because this was not a storm, and it was not a medical crisis. This was a choice, made on land, fully within his control, in front of his own family. The man fans had respected for his composure, and leadership had been arrested for a confrontation with a stranger over an Uber app. For a lot of people who had defended him through everything, this one was hard to process. The legal fallout unfolded over months. He pleaded guilty to misdemeanor assault and got a deferred sentence that required alcohol treatment along with a full year of keeping a clean record. Then, in the summer of 2018, just days before the case was set to go to trial, he settled the driver's civil lawsuit for an amount that was never made public. The driver's lawyer put out a statement saying he hoped the settlement would push Sig to think hard about his behavior and make sure nothing like it ever happened again. Words like that, coming from a courtroom instead of the Bering Sea, cut deeper than any storm he had ever sailed through. And just when fans thought the worst was behind him, a lawsuit arrived that cut deeper than anything else ever had. The family secret that rocked everything. While the Uber case was grabbing headlines, another civil lawsuit had been quietly working its way through the Washington courts, and this one went far beyond a bad night out. In 2016, a woman named Melissa Ekstrom filed a personal injury claim against Sig. She was his estranged biological daughter, and she alleged that he had sexually abused her back in 1990, when she was around 2 years old, and her parents were in the middle of a bitter divorce. To be absolutely clear, Sig has strongly and consistently denied every single part of this accusation. His reaction was loud and immediate. He claimed the entire lawsuit was just a cheap cash grab and insisted the whole story was made up by his ex-wife during a nasty custody fight 30 years ago. To back himself up, he pointed to a major piece of evidence. During a court trial back in 1992, a judge ruled that he did not abuse his daughter. The court cleared his name, and the state never filed any criminal charges. Once the messy divorce was finalized, he ended up giving up his parental rights completely. The father and daughter lived as total strangers from that moment on, because nothing says completely cleared of all wrongdoing, quite like signing a legal document that ensures a person never has to see their own kid again. Melissa, who had grown up to become a family law attorney in Seattle, said the lawsuit was never about money. She told the media at the time that what happened to her as a child was the very reason she became a lawyer, even before she fully understood the extent of it. Her attorney said they intended to see the case through every legal step necessary. It was not the kind of story that had a clean ending for anyone involved. In 2018, a Washington state appeals court ruled the case could proceed, deciding that Melissa had been too young in 1992 to have had her own meaningful opportunity in court. Sig vowed to appeal to the state Supreme Court. The dispute reportedly faded from public view without a verdict against him. But the fact that it existed at all, the image of a father and his estranged daughter on opposite sides of a courtroom, haunted the narrative around him in a way that nothing else had. And while all of this was unfolding in the courts, his own brother, who had been a beloved fixture on the show for years, was also quietly disappearing from screens for reasons nobody wanted to say out loud. The family that had built its name on loyalty and strength was now dealing with cracks that fans could not ignore. What happened next was the moment the entire world had been waiting to see. And it happened. Live on television. The collapse that ruined everything. By the time cameras returned for season 21 of Deadliest Catch, Sig Hansen had already overcome 2 heart attacks, a public arrest, lawsuits, and decades of some of the toughest fishing in the world. Yet there he was, once again standing at the helm of the Northwestern. For many fans, it had become difficult to imagine the show, or the Bering Sea, without him. Then came the moment many fans had feared. While filming aboard the Northwestern, Sig Hansen suddenly collapsed. Doctors reportedly diagnosed him with severe exhaustion rather than another heart attack, but that offered little comfort, given his medical history. After everything his body had already endured, months of freezing temperatures, long hours, and almost no sleep had finally taken their toll. He was rushed to the hospital, and the cameras captured a scene that reminded viewers even legends have limits. Doctors were clear. They recommended he retire, or at the very least spend far less time out on the water. The internet reacted immediately. Fans and critics alike began writing pieces about the future of Deadliest Catch without Sig Hansen. The succession conversation that had been quietly building for years suddenly went loud. His daughter Mandy, who had been fishing alongside him and building her own reputation as a capable captain, was right there. The handover that the show had been setting up in the background suddenly felt not just possible, but inevitable. Some people were already writing his retirement as a fact. But then, Sig Hansen did the one thing nobody predicted, and the only thing that anyone who truly understood him should have seen coming. He came back, and there was nothing quiet or hesitant about the way he did it. No scaled-down version of the job where somebody else handled the hard parts while he watched from the sidelines. He returned as captain of the Northwestern for season 22, which premiered in 2026, and walked back onto that deck as if the previous season's finale had been a minor inconvenience rather than a medical event, serious enough for his doctors to recommend walking away for good. In June 2026, Sig Hansen spoke to People magazine and finally addressed the retirement rumors. His answer sounded exactly like the Sig fans had watched for years. He admitted that the more people told him it was time to retire, the more determined he became to keep going. He also explained that he could never see himself walking away completely, because even if someone else was running the Northwestern, his mind would still be out at sea, checking the weather, thinking about where the fleet was, and wondering how the season was going. For Sig, retirement was never just about leaving the boat. It meant leaving behind a life that had defined him for decades. What makes that admission remarkable is not the stubbornness, though the stubbornness is certainly there. What makes it remarkable is that he knows himself well enough to know this is exactly who he is. He is not pretending to be okay. He is not performing strength for the cameras. He genuinely cannot separate himself from the boat, the work, and the identity of being the one in charge. While many of the old guard have begun stepping away, Sig Hansen has chosen a different path. Wild Bill retired in early 2026, and several other longtime captains have also left the fleet. But Sig keeps returning to the Northwestern. At the same time, he has started mentoring a new generation of fishermen, passing on the lessons the Bering Sea once taught him. Away from the boat, his daughter Mandy is raising his grandchildren, while his son-in-law, Clark, has become an important part of the family business. The next chapter of the Hansen legacy is already taking shape, even as Sig refuses to step away from the center of it. Looking back on everything, the health scares, the legal battles, the family conflicts, and the years spent battling the Bering Sea, it is clear that Sig Hansen's story is far more complicated than the fearless captain viewers first met on Deadliest Catch. He built an extraordinary career, but it came with sacrifices that affected both his personal life and the people around him. Even now, after everything he has been through, walking away from the sea still seems harder than facing it. Should Sig Hansen finally step back and let Mandy take the helm? Or does he belong on that boat until the very last season? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.